And up next, it is my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Pierce, who is the Director of Social Media for American Airlines, who's going to share a few words. So please welcome Jonathan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Pierce. I'm Director of Social for American Airlines. And on behalf of the social team at American and everyone worldwide for American Airlines, it's our pleasure to be the airline sponsor and partner for Mashable Connect. American's been active in social media for a couple of years now. We're having set up Twitter and Facebook sites in early 2009. And our involvement in social has grown considerably since then. And now we do not just have a site in the US, but we also have sites in the UK and Europe, in Japan, Brazil. We've recently also just launched the first frequent flyer program, Advantage social media site. So our challenge in social for American is twofold. Firstly, it's ensuring consistency. Consistency of our brand, of tonality, our messaging, the service offering and the product that's offered on each channel, and also of the customer service that we're providing. Secondly, it's figuring out how to grow brand advocates and mobilizing the people that fly us every day into becoming advocates on our channel. But for a company the size and global scope as American, these challenges are not a quick fix. It requires social to be understood and embraced by everyone in the organization. It also requires the social team to be at the heart of the company with collaboration across each group. And finally, it requires the social media team to be thought leaders, sharing insights and customer trends with everybody. So as we go back to Dallas tomorrow, I personally also look forward to sharing a lot of the things I've learned with the team back there in headquarters. And also, just like to say again, we're delighted to support Mashable Connect and hopefully meet many more of you over the next couple of hours. So I'd now like to introduce you to Ian Schafer, who's the CEO and founder of Deep Focus. Ian is one of advertising's most influential voices in interactive marketing and social media. Prior to founding Deep Focus in 2002, Ian was vice president of the new media division of Miramax Films. Deep Focus is an award-winning engagement, social, and innovation agency. And under Ian's guidance, it has been lauded for its expertise and excellence at using digital media, technology, creative, and communication strategies. Named a media maven by Advertising Age and one of Adweek's young ones, Ian has featured in Wired, New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few. You can also find Ian on YouTube, where there is a video of him unboxing a Commodore 64 on his 9th birthday in 1984. So those of you who are online now, please do a search. But I'm sure he'd be happy to share this link with you if you're interested. We're honored to have Ian at Mashable Connect, and please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Ignore the other videos of me on YouTube. They're all shot in night vision. So thanks for having me today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for a flawless event, at least up until this presentation. So what I'm here to talk to you about, which will eventually show up on one of these screens, I think, is more of an intervention than anything else. And not necessarily an intervention for those of you in the room, but probably for those of you that are in the room, the people that you work with on a daily basis. Does anyone know who this guy is, actually? Because this will help couch the whole thing. Anyone? Yes. Yes, good job. So this is Nouriel Roubini, not exactly the happiest guy in the world, as you could tell by his complexion there. But basically, Nouriel was the whistleblower on the whole world economic crisis. He's the one that said, do you guys have any idea what these banks are doing? Do you have any idea what the mortgage scenario is, what the credit default swap scenario is, that these derivatives don't really mean anything? We're in for trouble. And people poo-pooed the guy. I mean, he's a very lauded professor at NYU, has had a wonderful resume, wonderful career. But people said, no, these bankers, they know what they're doing. We'll be okay. Obviously, we weren't, and this guy was right about everything. Today, I'm your Nouriel Rabini with less credentials. But what I'm here to tell you is that advertising impressions are dying a painful death, and we are blissfully unaware of what's happening. We're entering into an era, and it's an era that, that Steve Rebell talked about yesterday. It's something that, that Scott Heiferman alluded to, and it's something that Mike Lazzaro put into context, which is that the impression apocalypse, this whole notion of advertising to people based upon frequency of impressions and the amount of reach that we can establish and the number of eyeballs that we can maintain, the end of that is nigh. And there are about 6 points that I'm going to talk about before all my points get holes poken into them by Todd Wasserman from Mashable. But here's the deal. So CPMs will continue to precipitously decline as media agencies are not. Oh, I'm missing half of the content on all these slides. It's a good thing I have backup, so I'll just read them off to you. Sorry about that. CPMs are going to continue to precipitously decline as media agencies are not only placed into review, and that happens often, and every time a media agency is put into review, a fairy dies, by the way. But they're forced to shift to trading desks and demand-side platforms and real-time bidding scenarios. So what's happening here is that every time a large brand puts a media agency into review, they're expecting lower CPMs. Well, media agency reviews are starting to happen, around the same times as creative agency reviews are happening, which on average now is about 2 years. So as you can imagine, that's not a lot of time to get a lot of momentum with these brands and their dollars. And certainly every time you do that kind of thing and expect a lower price, the price has only one way to go. So this is a nightmare scenario for publishers, certainly, because they constantly have to find ways to keep display impressions up. And that's an issue that we're all dealing with in the world of advertising, which I will remind you is a subset of marketing. It's one tactic in the world of marketing. With that said, the same people, this is funny, I should ask you guys to fill in the second half of this. The same people that buy breadth, scale, are also not that good at buying depth or engagement. I mean, these are two different kinds of things. Buying tonnage, display ads, at again, at an increasingly lower CPM, is a skill in and of itself, but it's also one that's helped out by, by automation and, again, algorithms, self-serve platforms, things like that. That's one way of doing it. That's obviously a one-way communication of a message, and a display ad is binary. It's either on or off. But when you talk about depth, it's not just something that you can buy or buy access to. It's also something that you earn, and I think we're all aware of that. But at the end of the day, when we're developing these kinds of programs that do involve consumers to engage at a certain level, they do need to happen at scale. And while we do need to treat the consumer with the respect of a media platform, we also have to respect them and their ability to choose. And as they would say on an American Airlines flight, we know you've got a choice. Thanks for flying us. There's got to be some kind of value put there. And that value exchange is not something that's naturally planned for or acquired by a traditional media buyer that's out there, again, buying eyeballs and buying targeted eyeballs at that. As engagement becomes, that's funny, as engagement becomes more important to advertisers, the shift towards inventory yield management will leave us with few to plan or buy it. So what that means is basically that as media agencies realize they can buy more media for less money, it's also going to occur that you can buy more media with less people. And that's something that we're going to have to come to grips with as, again, all of this becomes more automated. It's going to continue to marginalize the advertising business. There's going to be a whole side of the advertising business that hasn't started happening already, and it has. That is squarely focused on delivering as many eyeballs as possible for as little money as possible. So you can see where this is going. It's leaving this whole side of advertising, which is the side of engagement, the side of actually meaning something to a consumer, the side of establishing a connection with that consumer. It's leaving that with no one to actually plan or buy for that, just people to earn it. And earning happens over time. Usually that time lasts longer than an average advertising budget does. And it goes longer than a quarter or even a year. That happens over time, and it's been difficult for companies to plan budgets around that. Sorry. Okay, this is a big statement. The most important half of it is not up there. But I think we can all see this coming. Facebook especially with the recent launch of their sponsored stories advertisements, they have started to be able to deliver better interaction or engagement rates than standard display advertising. And it should go without saying that Facebook is a big player in the display advertising space. So in the first quarter of 2011, Comscore reported that Facebook delivered about 1/3 of all of the internet's display advertising. That's kind of a crazy number, especially when you consider that that's all on Facebook.com. Entertain this thought. Facebook's manifest destiny, and I think it's been obvious that it's not just on Facebook. So with the advent of the like button or the share button or universal login across sites using Facebook IDs, Facebook is now just as important in powering experiences off Facebook as they are on Facebook. So the logical conclusion that can be drawn is that at some point, maybe soon, those Facebook ads, and maybe they're the sponsored story ads, maybe those ads start to break out from Facebook.com. Maybe they start getting delivered across the web, powered by the interest graph as opposed to contextual targeting. And imagine, if you will, Facebook being willing to pay out more to the publishers that use those Facebook ads than Google AdSense. What do you think that's going to do to the amount of display advertising that Facebook is responsible for on the internet? Probably doubles it. So that makes the connections that you start on places like Facebook, or the amount that you leverage Facebook, that much more important. At least that's probably what they would have you believe. So that takes an entirely different form of planning. And even today, you've got most of the media agencies spending most of the money on Facebook advertising. And again, I'd argue that's not the right thing to do necessarily. Those are the same agencies that are buying reach and frequency. Why should they be responsible for establishing connections? Can they be responsible for establishing connections? Is it financially feasible for them to be worrying about establishing connections when, again, their agencies are getting evaluated on the amount of the CPM? So again, once Facebook ads break out of Facebook and start leveraging the interest graph, it's going to make engagement even more important. That means that connections may wind up being the new impressions in terms of what we determine as premium inventory as we begin to unlock the lifetime value of those connections. So once, and I don't know what it's going to require. Maybe it requires Facebook to open their data up a little bit. Maybe it requires us to get better at measuring what happens after a connection is made. But as we start to understand what the lifetime value of a connection is with a consumer, it starts us thinking more along the lines of customer relationship management, more along the lines of what adding someone to a mailing list or starting someone in a direct mail cycle makes us start thinking about things in that way, things that happen over time, where you can look at individual consumers, individual customers, and start understanding how you're building their value to your organization and how they're becoming better customers. We've got loyalty programs that do a lot of this right now. But then again, those loyalty programs are most frequently rewarding purchases. Well, influence is important too. And a great customer isn't one that necessarily spends the most at your store, online or off. They might be someone that influences others to spend more on your store, online and off. So again, it makes those connections way more important. Publishers will need to think and act like platforms. I'm going to go back to my cheat again. Sorry about that. Again, I jinxed it, didn't I? I said everything was going smoothly. Publishers will need to think and act like platforms and provide value. And this is, again, a missing link in this whole engagement formula. As content becomes liberated and as impressions lose significant worth, as connections, again, are what become more premium. It's becoming increasingly difficult to raise the CPMs across platforms, across publishers, without additional targeting. And we're trying to get better with all this targeting stuff, but it seems like every time we as an industry try to get better with targeting on display ads, it gets struck down by the government for a privacy issue, as maybe it should. So that's an issue that publishers in general are going to have to deal with, but it's something that platforms and even brands can exploit. If we start to understand what the lifetime connection or what the lifetime value of a connection with the consumer is worth, we'll start to be able to better understand how much do we spend on earning or acquiring in some way those connections? How much do we spend on cultivating the consumer? How much do we spend on loyalty programs? How much do we spend having conversations with consumers in the places where they are rather than trying to get them to us, which is what most display ads do? So all of this is happening now. It's literally changing the face of not just marketing, but advertising as we know it. And there is a chasm that's growing within within organizations is to people, who are on either sides of the issue. Unfortunately, the majority of the budgets lie on the media buyer side. More money, and there will be a lot of head nodding in this room, but more money needs to flow towards the engagement side. And engagement means something different for everybody. What we need to do, each of us, if we're responsible for any kind of spend whatsoever, whether it's marketing or advertising, we need to define what engagement parameters are. And engagement is a very convenient word because it means a lot to everybody. It means everything different to everyone. But once we adequately define engagement, in other words, what makes our customers better customers and what makes acquiring new customers through existing customers easier, then we start to unlock the secret and unravel the whole thing. But until then, we got a big rut-row moment that's happening. So it's up to us. It's up to us to adequately to stop just thinking about the touchy-feely aspects of evolving a community. Stop thinking about, I should say just thinking about managing relationships with individuals, influential or not. But again, start thinking about numbers, not necessarily money, but start thinking about measurement, analytics. Start thinking about ways that we can understand what each dollar of investment yields in the form of a lifetime connection to a customer. Not what happens directly after a click, not what happens directly after a like, but actually look at things over time. And whether that means merging Salesforce and Facebook together, I don't know, that's one option. You heard it here first. Maybe it's us, forming those conclusions ourselves and developing the technology and platforms to do it. But this is what we are going to need to do in order to deliver scale, not just from a marketing standpoint and the amount of consumers that we engage with, but scale in terms of internal budgets. Because without those, we can't adequately grow engagement philosophies and put the consumer at the center of a marketing program. I'm going to leave you with that thought, so thank you for that. But now Todd Wasserman from Mashable is going to poke holes in everything that I just said. So thanks, guys. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks a lot, Ian.
Sure.
One thing I was wondering when you talk about this apocalypse scenario.
May 21st.
That was my question, man. Okay, ruined it. The other thing, playing the devil's advocate here, don't you think that display advertising at least, obviously they have very low click-through rates, but aren't they good for raising awareness?
In theory, yeah, but that's only half of the thing that actually gets a consumer to act. McKinsey did this great study in late 2009, looking at the consumer decision journey. Historically, consumers made decisions in a very linear fashion. And as advertisers and marketers, we tried to influence that at the fat end of it, which was awareness. So once consumers were aware of a particular brand or product, that started that cycle going. But most of the money was hurled at awareness because that was the single biggest driver of sales growth and volume. Something funny happened over the last several years, and it's certainly been directly attributable to the explosion of social media, where consumers are now spending more time asking each other about decisions, purchase decisions or otherwise, before they make them. So they broke down the consumer decision journey into 3 phases. One is still this awareness phase, and it's a necessary part of it. It's only half the story, because the second phase is actually what's happening between consumers, active evaluation. So people asking other people, again, passively or actively, what they think about a product. Or someone saying, I'm considering buying this, what do you think? Or you're making a search result public, or whatever it might be, people have what to say about everything generally. And as all that stuff gets indexed by search engines and becomes permanent, it's starting to build up a huge research platform for consumers to access. So interactions between the decider and the influencer are happening all the time, but access to research that are happening between other deciders and influencers are actually impacting other people's decisions too. So it's becoming, awareness is only half the story. Intent is classically in the last several years, has been most influenced by engagement. And every client that we've worked with, every study that we've either participated in or read, signifies that. So yeah, awareness is important. Display ads aren't necessarily going away. They're just becoming actually easier to buy and less expensive. So we need to compensate for a lot of that, not just on the business side, but actually on the results side, with real engagement programs.
Well, how do you influence those conversations that you talk about? And And also, if I'm going to a friend to ask about something, isn't it possible that they bought it based on seeing display ads and were aware of the product, and it's sort of a cyclical thing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, like a connection shouldn't just mean necessarily like liking a brand on Facebook. I think, when we talk to brands, the common belief, and it's mistaken, is that someone's going to constantly, frequently, should say, go to the brand's page on Facebook, for example, or visit the brand's Twitter page and see all their tweets. But usually that when you establish that connection, it becomes very passive after that. So sometimes content makes it into your newsfeed, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you catch a tweet from a brand, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you choose to visit the blog at its front door, but most often you're getting to those posts via search results. All of those things, again, are complements to an effective awareness campaign. And all of these things need to live in harmony and not be the budget that fell to the floor, that we scramble to pick up and assemble. When you look at what engagement budgets or social media budgets look like as they grow, as every research study says they're not necessarily spent out there actually acquiring customers. A lot of times right now they're being spent on internal resources or the ability to hire a social media agency, whatever that is. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the growth happening in terms of spending against engagement, but it's still in the cute phase. And until we get out of a cute phase into some level of maturity, it's going to continue to get budgets that are cute.
But again, how do you influence that process? Say you're a marketer and you just, you realize that display ads are ineffective and you want to just get into that conversation. What are the ways of doing it? Providing social currency?
Yeah, well, it starts with providing some kind of value and accurately communicating why you should form some kind of connection with that brand. Because most people don't go around like saying, I want to have a connection to Bounty. It's like that's not what they're thinking on an everyday basis. If it means they can get access to maybe a frequent purchase program for Bounty, yeah, maybe. I mean, the number one reason why people start a connection with a brand in any platform is for some kind of value, whether that's an opportunity to win something or a discount, some kind of coupon. That's fine. That's why you see like companies like Groupon growing so wildly, is because people want to save money. And oftentimes, if you're establishing a connection with the brand, if that can yield that savings, it's the reason why loyalty programs were invented in the first place. I mean, that's the kind of thing that brands need to do, again, in concert with their awareness, which should be a big part of their new customer acquisition programs. But their customer retention programs, I would say customer improvement programs, should be done through engagement programs. And that may mean doing some great things with the people that like you on Facebook. Maybe it means building some kind of microsite that acts as some other kind of loyalty program or some other kind of multiple type of engagement platform, which improves not just the conversations or connections that people have with the brand directly, but that happen between customers of a brand too. Oftentimes that's where the majority of the earned impressions are going to happen, not between the brand and the consumer, but between consumers and each other. And I think Scott yesterday, Heiferman, talked about that a little bit, like the between, I think, each other, yeah, Captain EO. Like that is where most of the value of this happens. And if we can accurately, or close to it, understand what the value of those interactions are, we're gonna get just as much respect as the display media buyers do in the form of not just spending, but strategy too.
Well, is there any money in that? I mean, if a Facebook site is free, if you're a brand, giving free stuff to your brand advocates is not huge. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a way to make money for outside agencies there.
Well, on average, I would argue that there's actually way more upside because you could actually prove the growth that you're doing, through the consumers for the brand. So if on average you spend, $25 a year with the brand, and with an engagement program, you prove that year over year you can double that per existing customer. I mean, I think everyone says that the best place for growing your revenue is through existing customers. If you can actually do that, as an agency, you can maybe, and this is a dirty word, my CFO would kill me, but put forth some kind of incentive program where you're actually a true partner in the growth of the customer base. Not necessarily in the bottom line growth of the business, but actually find a better proxy for measurement. Actual growth of the average, whether it's order size or the number of orders that originate through a particular existing customer, and grow the business that way. So in that sense, there is a lot of money, and I would argue that it's easier to grow what existing customers are spending on your brand than go out and acquire new ones. more efficient anyway.
Also, I wanted to ask you about a Forrester study that we ran a story on recently, and they looked at the holiday season for 2010, and the gist of it was that social media had really almost no influence on online retail purchases. It was just looking at that. But what do you make of that?
That was the holiday season, right? So, well, I would say one, give it a little bit of time, because I think that will eventually start percolating a little more heavily. But the other thing is that there's a different. I would like to see that study done, and maybe it was, over the months that are not the gift-giving months. Purchases that you make for yourself, just logically, you would probably spend more time researching than a gift that you would buy for somebody else based upon what you know they want.
Human nature, huh?
Yeah, you would think. So, I mean, I think we all in the room have researched a buying decision once or twice in the last couple of weeks, few days. You know, and I think we would say that we probably do a little less research unless it meant just like price comparisons for buying gifts for somebody else. So, you know, I think social is going to be a huge driver of commerce. I mean, I think you see it already with like the flash shopping sites. I mean, the awareness of all those sites is primarily being driven through social media. It's not that they're out there buying a ton of, you know, television spots, and, you know, maybe they're doing some, you know, direct response advertising, but still, a lot of the growth of those brands, those companies, have been driven by word of mouth. Now, the value that they're giving is heavy discounts on expensive items, but that's a great value prop. So, you know, people will actively share that. Now, of course, by sharing it means maybe less access to those items, but it hasn't hit that point, and certainly guilt's growth hasn't been stunted by that either. So, you know, I think as long as you're providing value in some way, it's going to continue to become, engagement between people is going to continue to become a more important part of the purchasing process.
One a frequent criticism I've heard about Facebook marketing is that Facebook's atmosphere is like a party, and when the marketer shows up, it would be akin to having a party and some guy shilling Tide detergent, you know, showing up. It just doesn't fit with the atmosphere of what's going on there.
Right.
What do you make of that? I mean,
We have Tupperware parties.
well, okay.
That's not exactly the. But I would say that, I mean, trust has already eroded on Facebook to a certain degree. I mean, I got about 3 posts on my wall this morning about being able to see everyone that's viewed my profile. And I won an iPad 4 times this morning, too. So, you know, that trust is already starting to get eroded. But if again, I go back to the value prop. If you give people a reason to establish the connection to that brand rather than tell us that you like us, because again, what value do you get out of that? And there's only, you know, a few, as my friend Alan Wilk says, prom king brands out there, you know, that people want to be associated with. You know, there are, you know, you start to earn that trust back. And again, that goes, and I said loyalty programs about 12 times, but I think the future of a lot of this is tied into loyalty programs, because that's the one way that we've known over the last 50 years or more that we can actually establish real connections with our customers and influence their purchase behavior. So if we can tie that in, again, to behaviors that aren't just about the point of sale or point of purchase, then we'll be a lot better off. And Facebook is a great platform for that, and there are many others that are too.
At this time, I'd like to throw out to questions. Anyone have questions they want to pose to Ian? Or okay. In the meantime, I had another question for you. What was that? Oh, okay. You talked about Facebook. Oh, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we're in charge of Pandora Jewelry company, and their media buying budgets as well. And I can tell you that engagement is starting, like selling display ads and stuff like that. At least in Europe, we don't see that as much anymore. We're selling engagement. You give them the engagement score of their Facebook page before, like, to measure the ecosystem at first. And when you do the media buying, you have a range that you're willing to compromise that ecosystem with. And that's what you're paying for. Is okay, it might be a bit more expensive, but keep the ecosystem. Or we may compromise it by a certain amount of points, but then we get it cheaper because it might be incentivized. So we're definitely starting to see that.
Yeah, and you mentioned scoring, which is a great point, actually. So, you know, one of the things that I've learned to do when evaluating these kinds of engagement programs is take I'm a baseball fan, so forgive me, but is take a very sabermetric approach to it. So, if any of you aren't familiar with sabermetrics, it's basically the objective measurement of a baseball player's performance. It was established by the Society for American Baseball Research, hence Saber. But what they do is instead of looking at a player's batting average, for example, which is the number of hits divided by at-bats, they look at that player's propensity to score runs or to account for runs. So that's hits with runners on base, the number of total bases they have around a diamond. And those are the kinds of things that produce runs, and runs win ball games. So if our goal in every engagement program is to win, we have to define what those wins look like. And defining, again, what those wins look like looks different to everybody. But if you can score those and create these archetypes that actually match up to that in some way and score it as a result, and how close you're getting to that win, we'll be a lot better off. And you can actually, and you could fund that and scale it back, and you could prioritize and deprioritize based upon that effort's or even that individual's propensity to win or produce runs that result in wins. So that's an approach that we've been taking to all the engagement programs that we've been developing. And it's been working out really well because we're producing real business results, kind of like what you're seeing too. And again, it becomes more efficient that way because once you hit a certain momentum, again, display ads are binary, they're either on or off. Once you hit certain momentum with engagement programs, they start yielding on their own. They're like crops that you tend to in Farmville. Yeah.
Anyone else? Would you mind coming up and asking on the microphone, please?
We have a platform, we work a lot with affiliates, and there's sort of a hyper focus on the last click. And I'm just curious about how, just because we're sort of focused on our own stuff, but how much attention is going into tracking a longer path of the click, basically. So you're not just sort of measuring the metric on the conversion of the final click, but actually tracking back on those paths hundreds of clicks, basically. Is that happening or?
Yeah, it's absolutely happening. We're looking at, we plug a lot of platforms into each other that help us get further away from that, what we call like the first degree of engagement, which is generally a click of some sort. That's that interaction mechanism. If it's on a tablet, it's a tap, whatever it is, that kind of interaction is just the first step that someone takes in that engagement journey. Even companies, let's talk about the company that has been most responsible for last click attribution, which is Google, which has made a lot of money doing so. They look at the marketing programs that they've got in market right now for things like Chrome. They're making HTML5 like music videos, to market this product. They're not, yeah, I'm sure they're running a ton of like house ads at Chrome too, but a lot of the awareness, the intent to use Chrome is being driven by those kinds of experiences. They've built an internal, in effect, agency at Google to deliver those kinds of engaging experiences. So even they're seeing the results. Literally, the last click attribution company is seeing the results of what they're doing on the engagement side and growing that team rapidly. But again, there's no end-to-end solution that we found that accurately traces the degrees at which you get away from that initial interaction. We look at it as kind of like the RSS logo, where like sonar, right? Yeah. So it's like the further degrees away from an initial interaction you get, it's not the weaker it gets, actually potentially the stronger it gets. So we look at things like speed and velocity. Things that happen, again, as a result of that click and how many people it travels through, how fast, the intensity. Those are the kinds of things that need to be looked at when evaluating those kinds of efforts. And again, not just that last click attribution, because to your point about display, one of the great defenses of display advertising has been the look back window. So yeah, someone might see a banner ad and 30 days later they visit the site, and then the banner ad gets credit for it. There are a lot of other things happening in that 30-day window that might have led that person back to the site. But from an attribution standpoint, we're really holding on to what it is that display advertising is responsible for, even as it has its like kind of death spasms.
Can you sort of...
I watch too much CSI.
Yeah. Can you just tell me a few of the tools that you use for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, well, we're working with some fascinating companies. One of the companies that I'm fond of on the video side of things, for example, is a company called Sharethrough. I really like what they've been doing just in terms of measurement, and also in terms of distributing content, but then measuring what happens after the initial view of the content. I even like what they're doing in terms of incentivizing views of the content. So they just announced a partnership with Facebook, I guess last week maybe, where people are being incentivized to engage with that content through the use of Facebook credits. It's an incentive program, it's an experiment, but I think, again, in a race to actually prove to the consumer that there is value to be had for watching a piece of promotional content, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, I'm being told that we're out of time, unfortunately. If you have any more questions, Ian will be around. So thank you, everyone.
Cool.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.